The end of the year is finally here. 2024 is officially over, which means the end of yet another movie-going season. This past year, we got so many hit films, as well as some underdogs within the mainstream sphere that crept up and made an impact when no one expected it. For myself as a film critic, it was a year in which I experienced a lot that cinema had to offer. From covering festivals such as Sundance and SFF, to interviewing some major figures inside the film industry, to landing my own review segment on broadcast news, this past year hasn't just been a major one for film, but it's been an impactful one on my own life as well. I could not have imagined everything that's happened to me at the beginning of this year, and I know I could not have done it without the support of each and every one of you watching. Interacting and sharing my thoughts with like-minded lovers of cinema keeps me motivated and invigorated to create and share content with you all. And I've met and talked to some amazing people this year that have helped me every step of the way, including you all. Here's to both of our futures, wherever that may be. With that out of the way, let's get into the main bulk of this video, which is why you clicked on it after all. I saw 112 new releases this year and kept tabs on all of them on my ranking list throughout the year. Selecting a top 10 of the year is a difficult task, especially in a year where there's so many standouts and frontrunners become apparent. Yet I finally limited it down to a list that portrays a well-rounded balance of the best that cinema had to offer this year. In addition, where applicable, I'll be telling you all where you can check these films out if they seem interesting to you and you want to learn more about them further, with all of that information being linked down in the description down below. With that said, let's finally dive into my top 10 favorite films of 2024. At number 10, we have a smaller budget film that stands apart from the rest of the movies on this list, not just in terms of content, but in terms of how it was made and produced, as it was actually filmed in secret, with the footage being smuggled out of their country to an editor and standby in a nearby area. The film in question is The Seed of the Sacred Fig, which is directed by Mohammad Razaloff. A tense, taut, and stress-inducing thriller from start to finish, it's a movie where I went in with very little in the way of expectation or knowledge and walked away absolutely stunned. The film follows a judge named Iman, who resides with his family in Tehran at the height of civil unrest within the area. With tensions rising both outside and within his own family, Iman discovers that his gun he's been given in relation to his duty has gone missing, and the prime suspects lie within his own family. As Iman begins to interrogate and strain his relationships with his family, the tension between the two worlds begins to blend in a horrific way that no one can imagine. The slower and more meditative pace of the film is unique in that the pacing is deliberately quiet and more contemplative, yet the film never drags, due in part to how intense the situation and circumstances are surrounding each character. Razaloff directs this with such a steady and nuanced hand, with sequences where you in disbelief in how they ever managed to pull off the filming of this project in secret. It's emotionally and mentally exhausting in the best way possible, and it's definitely a lot of movie to take it upon first viewing. It's a film that I found myself thinking about more and more upon my first watch, reflecting on so many of its key themes and ideas. The film is uncomfortable, but it's pulled off in such an artistic way, where you feel placed right into the middle of this turmoil and witness firsthand as their relationships and ideas begin to crumble about each other and what they are all capable of. With Razaloff inserting graphic real-life footage of the protests within Tehran to place audiences inside a unique viewpoint into the situation. Granted, while the bulk of the film is well accomplished, it does rank slightly lower on my list because of some third-act choices that somewhat undermine the slower and more contemplative pacing it has going for it throughout. The setup of the film is pure brilliance, and while the third act manages to stick the landing overall, it does somewhat lean into more mainstream tendencies, which feels somewhat disappointing and jarring given the rest of the film up to that point. The film as a whole left me wanting a little bit something more concrete and resolute in execution, but it didn't overall take away from the overall impact that this had on me. It's a film that demands to be seen, if not just for the secret filming, and for the gripping and intense plot line that slowly unravels as the story progresses. It definitely will not be for everyone, as the graphic content alone is sure to steer some prospective viewers away, but it's a movie that will leave you with a lot to ponder and contemplate as you sit with it. At number 9, we have a smaller independent film that passed under everyone's radar, which is a movie titled The Last Stop in Yuma County, which is directed by Francis Galuppi and stars Jim Cummings and Jocelyn Donahue. As a huge fan of Jim Cummings and his previous directorial work, I was interested to see how he would handle a more dramatic role. That, plus the fact that Galuppi was attached to the new Evil Dead movie right after this film released, made me intrigued to see what the film as a whole would be, and wow, nothing could have prepared me for this at all. The film follows a group of strangers stranded at a combination gas station and diner in the middle of the Arizona desert, all awaiting the arrival of a fuel truck so they can go their separate ways. With the arrival of two mysterious bank robbers on the run, these unsuspecting travelers find themselves pitted in a ruthless and complex struggle to make it out alive. This is a movie that truly impressed me with how grandiose its scope is with a comparatively tiny budget cast and crew. As a huge fan of both Western films and the work of the Coen brothers, this feels like an earnest and heartfelt homage to both, while also standing apart and doing its own thing. It's the film of the year where I can confidently say I've never seen anything like it, which is incredibly commendable. Jim Cummings truly shines as the main character, combining his quirky sensibilities with the more dramatic edge that the role requires, which can also be said for Jocelyn Donahue. Richard Brake delivers one of the most terrifying, intense, and stunning performances of the year, as one of the bank robbers, solidifying his status as one of the scariest people currently working inside the industry. Director Francis Galuppi knocks this out of the park completely in a staggering home run feat, with so much careful choice and distinction in every single moment and character interaction. At a tiny runtime of 90 minutes, this film hauls from start to finish. There's little time to breathe or become acquainted with the circumstances surrounding these characters. Instead, Gillespie throws you right into the middle of the action, never letting up the tension and instead keeping the product simmering slowly until an explosive final act. It's films like this that truly reinvent my love for the independent film industry. A film of this scope and ambition probably would not have been made inside the mainstream studio landscape, and it's truly a thing of beauty to watch Gillespie and company complete this so well. If you want an intense and cutthroat ride from start to finish that will leave you shell-shocked and stressed by the time the credits roll, this is the film for you. It's easily one of the most impressive indie features of the last few years, and is without a doubt worth a watch. At number 8, we have a major blockbuster that is a follow-up feature to a 2021 sci-fi epic that has become one of the most talked about films of the year. Directed by Denis Villeneuve, that film is Dune Part 2. A top 10 films of 2024 list without this movie on it would just not be complete. As much as has been said all year, including in my own review from back upon its release, this is easily one of the most impressive feature films of the year. As someone who didn't really care for the first Dune film upon my initial viewing of it, the problems I had with the first entry were fixed with this tenfold. The scope of this film is just simply awe-inspiring. Villeneuve truly delivers in every single aspect you could possibly ask for. Timothée Chalamet stands out as Paul Atreides in this entry, and manages to have several moments throughout where he truly embodies his character in comparison to the first film. Austin Butler, as the shadowy villain figure, is also incredible casting, as he disappears into the role and truly makes it his own. The action set pieces and effects are seamless and grandiose, and the ambition of the plot overall is truly jaw-dropping at how effectively they pull it off. As entertaining and enthralling as the film is, it does rank lower on my list due in part to some creative choices that feel somewhat constrained and superficial. The middle act in particular didn't quite work for me, as it felt way too melodramatic and showy without any of the substance to support a plot of this weight. Overall though, without getting into spoilers, this is quite simply a film you have to see to believe. I personally have not read the Dune books myself, but hearing from people who claim the novels are unadaptable and seeing how well this was brought to the big screen by Villeneuve and company, I'm willing to forgive what few shortcomings it has overall. Seeing this in IMAX was a staggering experience. It's a film where seeing it on the small screen does not do it proper justice. If you're looking for a lyrical and sprawling science fiction epic, this is easily one of the best films of the year in that regard. At number 7, we have another follow-up to a previous science fiction action flick that also involves a lot of sand, although this one trades in the vibrant world of Arrakis for the bleak and harsh post-apocalyptic world here on Earth. The film in question is Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, which is the follow-up to George Miller's smash hit 2015 film Mad Max Fury Road. Now, Fury Road is one of my favorite action films of all time. It's essentially a 2-hour-long chase sequence that never lets up from start to finish, featuring staggering practical effects and choreographed stunt sequences that felt so different from most of the other action films in the market at the time. Entering this specific installment, almost 10 years after the initial installment, I was somewhat hesitant to see how Miller would craft a prequel to the first film that still managed to capture the highs of Fury Road while also standing apart on its own, and the end result is truly shocking. I absolutely loved this film, and it's a shame to see that no one cared to check this out within theaters. In a sea of formulaic and generic action flicks, George Miller delivers a contemplative and poignant revenge tale that takes the basic pitfalls and tropes of such a story and reinvents them in such a unique way. Serving to set up the events involving the character of Furiosa from Fury Road by explaining her backstory, Anya Taylor-Joy shines as the lead role, delivering a menacing and heartfelt portrayal that manages to stand alongside Charlize Theron's performance from the original. However, instead of playing such a role as a blatant homage to Theron's performance, Anya Taylor-Joy manages to make it her own with ease. Chris Hemsworth is also having an absolute blast here as the villain Dementus, playing the character with a crazed and eccentric nature that also belies a menacing and dark side. As was the case with Fury Road, the action here is just impeccable. Miller knows how to choreograph and direct such a film where the action takes the forefront and places viewers inside this violent and destructive world again like we never left. It's such a different film from the first, which is why it works so well. It moves at a completely different clip and explores its own story arcs in an innovative way. The character arc of Furiosa in particular is fascinating to track from start to finish. Watching her try to grapple and battle with the concept of revenge is eye-opening and thought-provoking, opening up such a wide and visceral reaction for audiences everywhere. It's a very close race to say whether I liked Furiosa or Fury Road better, as I hate to compare two very different movies. However, if I had to choose one, I'm sticking with Fury Road. Don't get me wrong, Furiosa is almost just as good as Fury Road in every way, but there are a few factors that slightly hold us back at the end of the day. In particular, the over-reliance on CGI here is painful to see from a film that felt so grounded and real in the last installment due in part to practical effects. The film also devotes a little bit too much time to Furiosa's backstory and not enough on a definitive conclusion, leaving the audience with an ending that doesn't feel earned or needed and a start that feels bloated and overdone. Overall though, this is easily one of my favorite cinematic experiences of the year. If you haven't seen this film or Fury Road, you owe it to yourself to watch both of them immediately. Arriving at the number 6 spot is a smaller animated film that was actually nominated for an Oscar last year, but didn't release until this year due to Neon Strain's distribution, which is Robot Dreams, directed by Pablo Berger. Now, this is a fairly unassuming movie on its surface, and looks deceptively simple. Once you delve into the film, however, you unearth a poignant and complex film full of so much emotional truth and depth in every single action. Told with zero dialogue whatsoever, the film follows Dog, living in 1980s New York City, who feels somewhat lonely with no companionship or friendship in his life. One day, he decides to order and assemble a robot based off in an advertisement he sees on television, and both himself and the robot become friends and embark on a sprawling adventure across the city. The basic setup of the film is quite simple, but as the film unravels, we begin to discover that the execution is incredibly impactful and moving, easily surpassing many other films of this caliber. The fact that such an impactful and moving story is told with no words whatsoever is truly impressive. It's a profound and heartfelt look at relationships and friendship in the grand scheme of life. It's a movie about small acts of kindness that make the most impact overall. Watching Dog and Robot as they interact throughout the first 30 minutes, we see two polar opposites drawn together by their need for interaction and connection in such an impactful and moving way. Every character beat and moment is amplified for the fact that we don't receive dialogue to complement this, but rather rely on the expressive animation to further convey these moments. However, that viewpoint is harshly and jarringly interrupted in such an affecting angle. Dog and Robot begin to grow apart as their lives and circumstances take them different directions, which is such a powerful exploration at relationships and friendships deteriorating as life moves on. It's an impactful reminder to slow down and take every moment for what it is, cherishing the seconds we spend with the people we love and living life with no regrets. The lush 80s New York City landscape is complemented with a fantastic score and soundtrack that highlight the vibrant life inside the city. The animation is somewhat simplified, but it fits the tone and atmosphere of such a story with ease. Overall, it's a film that doesn't seem groundbreaking on its surface, but manages to portray one of the most grounded and realistic facsimiles of real-life relationships that have ever been put to screen. Fair warning, though, that it is a film that will make you feel both sad and uplifted, joyous and distraught. It carries you among all the currents of the emotional landscape. However, it's a movie where the sadness carries the bittersweet weight of a missed opportunity, where you feel sad about these circumstances, but recognize that these characters are on a brighter path towards their futures. It's a small yet powerful movie that deserves to be seen with ease, and I cannot wait to see more from this director in the future. Arriving at the number 5 spot is a film that similarly uses animation to tell a complex story, although not in the way you may think. The film is titled The Remarkable Life of Ibelin and is directed by Benjamin Reed. I saw this back at Sundance in January and it blew me away. I never could have imagined back then that this would still be in my top 10 list at year's end, but it's a true testament to how powerful and masterful this film is. An unconventional documentary telling a unique story in such a unique way. The film follows a Norwegian gamer named Matt Steen, who was diagnosed with a rare degenerative muscular disorder at a young age. As a result, he spends a lot of his time behind a computer screen, compulsively playing an online role-playing video game as an escape. After he dies at a young age, his parents mourn what they feel has been a lonely and isolated life in which he never made an impact on anyone's lives, until they start to receive messages from people all around the world who play with Matt's on the game, sending their condolences and revealing to his parents about how much of a profound impact he had on people. This is the setup of a documentary that turns the structure of the genre on its head, delivering a film in which the biggest surprises are the smallest moments of kindness and empathy throughout. It's a fascinating, complex, and nuanced insight into the extraordinary life of this one person who helps so many lives. As we watch the stunning World of Warcraft-style animation as it conveys a lot of Matt's real in-game moments, we learn so much about this person and about how he helped his fellow teammates through so much of the trials of their own lives through kindness and compassion. It's a film where I walked away from it stunned upon first viewing, and I still find myself thinking about it all these months later. Perhaps the biggest bit of praise I can offer to this film is that it easily is the most important and impactful film of the year. It might not seem like much on its surface, but it packs an emotional and nuanced punch and raises important questions relating to friendship and relationships in a digital age, and about gaming as a construct through which communication and camaraderie can be found. It's a film that invites you to ponder and examine these themes through such a vibrant and poignant lens, and for that reason, it stands apart from the bulk of documentaries released not just this year, but within the last few years as well. Returning back to the animation medium for the number 4 pick, we have yet another independent animated film, this time from Latvia. Already picking up animated awards buzz heading to the major award shows next year, the film is titled Flow and is directed by Gins Ibelin. I've already raved about this one in my initial review, which you can find right here, yet this film still manages to capture my attention when thinking and reflecting upon it. It's a deeply thought-provoking film in such a small package, which perfectly sums up the execution of its premise. Yet again, another animated film expertly employing the use of no dialogue to tell a complex and nuanced story, the film follows a black cat and a cast of animal characters who find themselves on a boat in the middle of the ocean, as a massive flood ravages the post-apocalyptic world they find themselves in. As the film starts, it doesn't seem like much on its surface, but within a comparatively tiny runtime of 85 minutes, much like the flood the animals find themselves in within the film, audiences are swept away on a grandiose and sweeping adventure of monumental proportions. It's a film that raises so many questions and ideas about a lot of its moments and running themes throughout. It's a movie that invites you to examine and interpret those sequences and thoughts in your own unique way. The animation is absolutely stunning, the music score is ethereal and haunting, and the overall running emotional core throughout this is intact and functioning on a complex level. I've sat with this film for weeks since I first saw it, and upon rewatch, I was still pondering so much of what it was trying to say. At its core, it's a movie about the careful balance of life, where one life form thrives, another dies, and vice versa. There's never truly peace for any one group of living creatures at any time. This is a somber fact of life, but one that seems ultimately unchangeable. That is, unless we make that change, unless we ensure that we create that peace wherever possible through our words and actions. It's smaller films like this that make all the difference in terms of impact upon cinema. It's films like this that employ the medium of animation in such an expert and mature way that truly make this film stand out not just in terms of animated output within the last few years, but in terms of cinema overall. You will not find a more stunning or moving motion picture all year in terms of visual craft. It's a movie that invites you to explore and interpret so much of its complexity and encourages that healthy discussion we so desperately strive for from films overall. At number 3, we have yet another serious awards contender heading into the new year that shamefully no one seems to be talking about. The film in question is titled Sing Sing and stars Coleman Domingo in a masterful performance as Divine G, a man imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. There he finds his purpose and impact by creating an acting theater group along other incarcerated men, performing as a way to cope with life inside these walls. This is a movie that seems carefully manufactured to garner awards consideration, but unlike the majority of such Oscar-bait cinema, the reality is that this film feels 10 times more earnest and heartfelt than many other films of this caliber. This is thanks not just due in part to Greg Quadar's masterful direction, but Coleman Domingo stepping into this role, commanding every single on-screen moment with a presence you rarely find in leading performances nowadays. The structure of the film is unique in that the film is actually based on a true story and features performances in the supporting cast from people who were actually imprisoned within the system and participated in the titular theater troupe, which adds such a layer of nuance and realism to a film that feels so poignant and affecting. It's a movie full of so much spirit, bursting in every single frame. It feels so careful and meticulous in how it executes such an impactful story with ease, never feeling too melodramatic for its own good, yet never striking a balance where the emotional impact isn't felt. I've talked about this one more in depth in a previous review, which you can find right here, but it's truly just such a phenomenal, inspiring film on so many levels and deserves a lot more conversation surrounding it than it is warranted thus far. Sliding in at number 2 on my list is a critically acclaimed family film that has garnered numerous accolades thus far and stands as a landmark in the animated sphere, which is the Chris Sanders directed DreamWorks movie, The Wild Robot. Now, I could go off on a tangent about how much I love this movie. In fact, I already kind of did at this review, which is linked right here. When I first saw the film, I walked away absolutely shell-shocked at what it accomplished. Based on the children's novel by Peter Brown, The Wild Robot tells the story of Rosm7134, nicknamed Roz for short, who is a robot that is stranded on a deserted island after a storm knocks her off of her transporter. Alone and without any guidance to steer her programming, Roz begins to befriend the animals of the island and starts to develop a complex parental bond with an orphan gosling. This film seems deceptively simple in premise, which comes with the territory when it's based off of a children's novel. But in execution, Sanders and team built off of this premise to deliver a complex and nuanced take on parenthood that rises above the rest of the films this year in terms of emotional execution. It's a deeply affecting and moving film on so many levels, full of a somber undercurrent that cuts deep as the film progresses. The character arc of Roz in particular without the film is explored so earnestly throughout the runtime, and the questions and themes the film raises are equally profound. It's a movie about the struggles of parenthood and the sacrifices we make for the people we love, particularly throughout the angle of parent-child relationships. It's a film that cuts deep, even if you aren't a parent. The emotional core of this works in a way which few films of its caliber manage to pull off, highlighting so much vulnerability in every moment. The voice cast is top-notch, with Lupita Nyong'o shining as Roz in a vocal performance that changes based off the character nuances at each key moment within the story. The 2D and 3D watercolor style blend of animation that DreamWorks first exemplified so expertly with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish back in 2022 works perfectly for the woodland setting of the film, with vibrant expressions from all the characters and layered backgrounds that look and feel like moving paintings, with stunning lighting and color correction effects highlighting the textured detail of this environment. Even the score by Chris Bowers is absolutely breathtaking, with several tracks that have been on repeat since I first saw the film. Overall, the biggest thing I can say about this film is it is truly special. It's heartfelt, it's emotional, and poignant with ease, with a beating heart and a real soul to it that you don't see in most animated movies nowadays. It stands as a vanguard of animation and film among this year and the last several years. Seeing it multiple times was a blast, and I even got to meet the director of the film, Chris Sanders, and composer Chris Bowers at a film festival I attended. As one of the last in-house productions DreamWorks is creating before outsourcing within their future projects, I truly hope awards bodies consider this film with a serious intensity. It highlights so much of the artistic work that DreamWorks has done in the past and serves as a last final project of their own to stand proud in. Finally, my number one spot on the list, which is my absolute favorite film from this year, is in fact the Brady Corbett-directed, Adrian Brody starring 4-hour American epic, which is The Brutalist. This is easily the film of the year for me. In fact, it's the film of the last several years for me. As a film buff, I always cherish these older American epics from the 60s and 70s, which capture immense and grandiose stories of the American experience in a way which modern-day films cannot hold a candle to. That's why the biggest ounce of praise I can heap upon a movie like The Brutalist is that it doesn't feel like a modern-day movie. Nothing about this movie feels conventional. It feels like a film made in a bygone era and placed in a time capsule until this year, unveiled in all its glory as any fabled restoration would be. The cinematography is so vintage and controlled, with the VistaVision shots shining in such a vibrant nature, especially if you catch it at one of its film projection runs in 35mm or 70mm like I did. The acting from Adrian Brody, Felicity Jones, and specifically Guy Pearce is staggering, with these nuanced performances bringing these complex characters to life. Brady Corbett's directorial flair here is absolutely monumental, and the script itself is so sweeping and ultimately moving. For a 4-hour film, the runtime might be daunting, but it passes by in the blink of an eye. You find yourself so swept up in this story about a man seeking to make a name and opportunity, not just for himself, but for those he loves as well. It's as effective and moving a film about the rise and fall of the American dream as any that has ever been made. It stands as not just one of the best films of the entire calendar year, but one of the best films of the century itself. I've delved more in detail in my initial review, which is linked right here, but I'll say it again. Go see this movie when it releases. If you are a fan of cinema or film in any way, shape, or form, and want to see a film unlike anything that has been made within the past 20 to 30 years, go see this movie. I suspect this film will be a staggering player when award season arrives, and someday I believe we will be mentioning the name of this movie within film history itself. And that's my top 10 list of the year. What a year for film it was. Even if the films didn't make my top 10 list, there were still so many movies I cherished and loved throughout the year that deserves to be seen alone. Sometimes it's difficult to tell whether it's a strong year for movies. And while we didn't have any of the heavy hitters like years past, such as 2023 with Oppenheimer and Barbie, we still received incredible pieces of cinema that exemplify the best of the medium. If you're a fan of this content and would like to see more of my reviews, analysis, and commentary in relation to all films within 2025 and beyond, please be sure to like the video, subscribe, and comment down below with what films next year you're looking forward to the most. Also, let me know what your favorite films of 2024 were down in the comments below. From the bottom of my heart, thank you to each and every single one of you for making this year so impactful and special to me. With that, thank you once again so much for watching and have a happy new year.